The operation was again launched with clear military objectives designed to dismantle Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders. First, we are targeting and eliminating Iran's ballistic missile systems. Second, we are destroying the Iranian Navy. Third, we're ensuring Iran cannot rapidly rebuild or reconstitute its combat capability or combat power.
It was a long and detailed briefing and update on Operation Epic Fury that wrapped up in the last hour or so. And it's on Iran operations. New Israeli airstrikes are hitting deep inside Iran now. And Israel says it is targeting the Islamic regime's air defenses and missile launch sites. Iran and its proxy Hezbollah terrorists are firing barrages of rockets, drones, and missiles toward civilians in the region. And just this morning, an Israeli Defense Force official told Fox Iran and Hezbollah have started coordinating their attacks. So it's not just giving them money, which we know that terror state of Iran does with its proxies. Now they're in coordination with one of those terror groups. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of U.S. Central Command, provided this update on U.S. military action.
Now, we're less than 100 hours into this operation, and we've already struck nearly 2,000 targets with more than 2,000 munitions. We have severely degraded Iran's air defenses and destroyed hundreds of Iran's ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones. And in simple terms, we're focused on shooting all the things that can shoot at us. Our B-2 bombers and B-1 bombers have executed uncontested surgical strikes against multiple missile facilities deep inside Iran.
And this would be the goal. The Pentagon says the strikes are devastating Iran's military capabilities. U.S. bombers using precision strikes on missile facilities inside Iran. Officials say many of those targets were hit with no effective Iranian air defense response at all. Here's more from Admiral Cooper.
Now, in retaliation, the Iranian regime has launched over 500 ballistic missiles and over 2,000 drones. To be clear, Iran is indiscriminately targeting civilians as they launch these missiles and drones. You've seen it on TV. The evidence is crystal clear and overwhelming.
And it's been wave and wave after wave of that. Iranian missiles and drones have hit cities and population centers across the region. So they're not targeting military, they're targeting citizens of their neighbors. And I've been saying this since Saturday. We know that they have hit people who are more than just neutral toward them. Israeli and U.S. air defenses continue to intercept many of those incoming. But some are still making it through. Iran's regime is targeting diplomatic sites in the region. A CIA station at the U.S. Embassy compound in Riyadh was hit, and an Iranian drone strike hit near the U.S. consulate in Dubai. So far, no reports of any American injuries. The Israeli military is releasing videos of new strikes inside Iran, including this successful hit on a missile storage and production facility about 300 miles south of the capital of Iran, Tehran. Israel's Navy very much in the fight. The IDF says this video shows Israel defenses successfully intercepting a drone launched from western Lebanon. This new video shows Israel taking out an underground weapons storage site in Beirut, Lebanon. The strike hit a Hezbollah facility below the city, part of a series of attacks on Hezbollah infrastructure in that Lebanese capital over the past day.
I don't think Hezbollah is going to be much of a threat to Israel. They're still unless they start to use their long-range missiles. And I doubt if they're going to do that. They don't want to get into this fight. And I think they're reluctantly in it now, being pushed by the Iranians, because the Iranians literally are fighting for their survival. And I think it's more of a desperate act in what we're seeing.
Team Fox coverage now of all of the fast-breaking news. Vice Admiral Robert Harward will be with me coming up. Jennifer Griffin is in Washington. Let's begin with Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst in Tel Aviv, Israel. Trey.
Harris, good morning. I do want to start with some new information we've received from U.S. Central Command, who says in a historic first, long-range precision strike missiles were used in combat in Operation Epic Fury, providing an unrivaled deep strike capability. Admiral Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander, says in a statement, "I just could not be prouder of our men and women in uniform leveraging innovation to create dilemmas for the enemy. We know that Central Command is using everything in their power to go after the Iranian regime as they continue to launch these ballistic missile attacks against regional countries, U.S. forces, and Israel. The Israelis going after the Iranian regime again today. The IDF telling Fox News this evening that they have an entire strike list of targets they hit outside the capital of Tehran, including the IRGC headquarters, the Intelligence Directorate, and the Basij headquarters, all of these used to command in their efforts to strike civilians in the region." We do have a new soundbite from Effie Defrin, the top military spokesman in the IDF.
100 hours of fighting behind us, the Israeli Defense Force is facing forward. We started strong and we continue strong. We operate according to the orderly fighting plan in tight coordination and cooperation with the U.S. Army. We still have many targets and goals. In the coming days, we will proceed with the operation stages. We will deepen the harm to the regime's arrays, and we will continue dismantling its capabilities until the existential threats to the state of Israel are removed.
And in Iran, we're getting new video of empty streets, destruction there as the Israeli and American strikes continue, targeting everything having to do with the Iranian regime, looking to weaken this regime and send a message that they cannot win this war. A new statement from a resident in Tehran describes what they heard and saw earlier today.
There were 3 strong blasts, one after another. The third one was very powerful. The diplomatic police near Avini Park was hit. I've come here to see what happened. The explosions were too heavy. All windows in this neighborhood have been shattered. Many buildings have been ruined, and a few cars have been destroyed.
And as the Israelis are looking east, they're also looking north. The Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah getting directly involved in the fight, launching more rockets and drones over the border today. You can see in this video here, the Israelis are striking the Lebanese capital of Beirut with precision munition and a bombing campaign, trying to neutralize the threats from Hezbollah. But as we reported earlier today, Harris, there were 2 separate times where Hezbollah and Iran launched attacks against Israel simultaneously, looking to overwhelm air defense systems here. Harris?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when you and I were on the air before, during the height, right after October 7th, the height of that war with Hamas and Israel after taking Israeli citizens and killing so many of them, we were talking about maybe even a little bit more of command and control than we actually knew of from Iran, because they weren't just giving money to those proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. Remember, Hezbollah was then hitting almost in coordination from the north into Israel. And now we have some proof of that. Like, now we have more of those receipts, if you will. Trey Yingst, great reporting. Thank you.
Yesterday, in the Indian Ocean, and we'll play it on the screen there, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
This is the video of that rare moment in modern warfare. It highlights how the U.S. operation is going deep into its toolbox to defeat the enemy. The Wall Street Journal reporting President Trump is looking ahead. He's weighing possible support for Iranian militia that could help dislodge Tehran's current radical Islamic regime. That leadership structure has been decimated by U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. We've been showing you that. Some reporting suggests Ayatollah Khamenei's oldest son has been chosen to succeed his father. But so far, we can't confirm that. A former State Department Deputy Special Envoy said this.
This is a heinous personality. He also has his own record of human rights abuses, and I could tell you that hopefully there's a big target on his head. The Iranian people will certainly reject him just the same way that they rejected the monster who his father was.
A new Fox News poll now, look at your screen, shows Americans are absolutely divided 50 to 50% over U.S. strikes in Iran. However, that same poll shows strong agreement on one point. A large majority of Americans say Iran poses a national security threat to the United States. Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is in D.C. Jennifer.
Hi, Harris. Well, I was at that Pentagon briefing this morning. Secretary Hegseth and General Dan Kane were asked to explain the end state of this war, why the threat was imminent, and whether the U.S. plans to arm a Kurdish insurgency to take on the remnants of the regime. Just 100 hours into this war, the U.S. military has nearly destroyed Iran's ability to fire ballistic missiles.
Iran's theater ballistic missile shots fired are down 86% from the first day of fighting, with a 23% decrease just in the last 24 hours. And their one-way attack drone shots are down 73% from the opening days.
Some of those drones are still getting through. Nearly half of Iran's ballistic missiles and drones have been aimed at the United Arab Emirates. In comparison, the UAE has taken 863 incoming missiles and UAVs. Israel, in comparison, 113. Today, 2 Greek F-16s shot down 2 Iranian drones off the coast of Cyprus. Last night, Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of U.S. Central Command, he said that in comparison to the start of the Iraq War and its shock and awe campaign, this operation is twice the scale of that operation in the first 24 hours. We have more details about how a U.S. Navy sub hunted and sank one of Iran's prized Navy vessels, which thought it was safe in the Indian Ocean. The Iranians built 4 of these Corvette-class missile ships in 2022. That's when they were introduced. They were named Shahid Soleimani, or Martyr Soleimani, after General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC Quds Force, who during President Trump's first term was killed by a U.S. strike that President Trump ordered on his convoy in Baghdad.
For the first time since 1945, a United States Navy fast attack submarine has sunk an enemy combatant ship using a single Mark 48 torpedo to achieve immediate effect, sending the warship to the bottom of the sea.
Secretary Hegseth said the U.S. military had no plans to arm an insurgency, but did not rule out that other elements of the government might. In the history of modern warfare, there have only been 3 successful regime change military operations: Japan and Germany during World War II, and Panama in 1990. The rest have ended in civil war or failed states.
Also, yesterday, the leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
Secretary Hegseth said that was not the reason the president decided to launch this war with Israel. The focus remains on destroying Iran's ability to project power through missiles, its navy, and its nuclear program. Harris.
Jennifer, thank you very much. And focus now, Vice Admiral Robert Harward, member of George W. Bush's National Security Council. He served as a U.S. Navy SEAL in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So glad to have you on the program today. Thank you. Jennifer kind of teed this up, and I want to go back now to that new video of those cheap one-way drones, as they're being called. Iran is using those. Some 2,000 fired already. We learned that from Secretary Hegseth this morning. Talk to me about those drones. I'm curious, Vice Admiral, where are they coming from? Are they making them there, or is someone supplying them for purchase?
Well, as we've seen over decades, the Iranians are very industrious. And so I would not be surprised if they're building them all. And I think this is a real turning point in the war on drones. As we saw in Afghanistan and Iraq, we used drones for ISR. In Ukraine, the Ukrainians started making them kinetic. And now we're seeing mass, swarms. And so that's a real differentiator. And I got to believe we're going after the production facilities to ensure we shut down all these elements of power. And I believe if we're not there already, we may be at the tipping point of really shutting down their ability to project power. And when that occurs, a lot of capacity and focus will go on removing the current regime.
Talk to me about that tipping point. Like, how do you know militarily when you get to that point?
Well, there's some easy indicators when in Qatar, in UAE, in Saudi, when business goes back to normal, where you're seeing civilian flights, people outside a lot. I was in Abu Dhabi today playing golf, and we saw a bunch of planes coming out of commercial airports. So when the number of strikes in the countries dissipate, you know we're having that success. And then we can shift capacity to going after the regime. Because at the end of the day, while we can completely decimate all this, if you're going to leave a regime in power who quickly goes to reconstitute using China and Russia and their allies, we've just exacerbated the problem. So I think once we get that tipping point, and if we're not there now, I think it's coming very quickly, the focus will go on really getting rid of these guys who have been murderers and part of this regime's killing their own people to ensure a government that's responsible and not repressive of its people.
You gave us such a tip of information there from your own personal experience today. You're going outside in Abu Dhabi, and that is a huge shift. We know they hit the airport. I mean, we know what's been going on there. We know that one of the universities, American universities, NYU's campus there, has been in lockdown with those kids, you know, in place and all of that. And the fact that there has been this kind of shift, that's the kind of thing that we can watch for with those planes taking off now, commercial planes. I really appreciate that. I want to get your thoughts, though, because President Trump said yesterday, upon being asked the question, what would the worst case scenario be? He said, well, that, you know, we do all this in 5 years. It goes right back to what you just said, Vice Admiral. Somebody either like what they already had, the Ayatollah, or worse. Talk that it could be his oldest son taking over. Fox has not independently confirmed that, but your first thoughts on that, even as a possibility?
The Iranian people won't accept that. When we reach that tipping point, and we may use surrogates like the Kurds and others to help provide and support the Iranian people are going to remember who murdered them, who repressed them. They're not going to allow that same regime, the kids of that regime, that same ideology to survive. So you can rest assured that the new government is not going to be one exporting terror, repressing its people. It's going to be ones the people will accept. So I think that's where all this is going in the not too distant future. And I hope we've hit that tipping point now, or will in the next day or two.
Well, look, there's no way to say if that new person, if it turns out to be his oldest son of the Ayatollah Khomeini or someone else within that old regime going forward, would have control of what's left of the military. And we haven't looked at what they have on the ground. And they just killed north of 35,000 of their own people for protesting. That population is not armed. Your quick thought on that, and then I'll move forward.
Well, they may get armed or they may have support. But again, we've, for the last 30 years, we've been experts finding people, fixing people, and finishing them. When we can turn the capacity of that away from projecting power now onto the leadership, you're not going to want to be the replacement. You're going to want to be part of the new government. So that's where that tipping point we're going to see in the not too distant future.
Vice Admiral Harward, thank you so very much for being with me. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.